We're jumping right back into the Tactica here. Battletech, circling back around, re-exploring, pushing out the Thunderbolt. And I wanted to focus on the Thunderbolt for today's vlog because there's this duality going on. It's a great mech. I love playing it. It has a lot of character, a lot of in-game history, and at the same time, it's in the Game of Armored Combat starter set. So if you purchase that set, or you're playing with your friend, you're going to face it at some point, or it can work as a real anchor point in your mech list. And being a heavier machine, it has a lot of options. It has a lot of versatility on the table. It's a heavier mech that wants to work and function as an assault class type mech. But the challenge is, like many of the Inner Sphere classic designs, if we're looking at the Warhammer, if we're looking at the Marauder, if we're looking at the Rifleman, heat management is very, very important. Heat management is key, especially on the Thunderbolt, because it's a machine that wants to get in close. It wants to wreck face. So it's not like the Rifleman, where if you push the heat, ideally you're trying to stay back. I mean, sometimes you have to close, sometimes things don't quite work out. But the Rifleman, being a support mech, wants to stay back. You can push the heat. You've got some distance. You've got some actual hexes in the way that you can maneuver. Likewise, the Warhammer, while that wants to get up close as a mech, and we kind of explored that in the Tactica checklist, you have the PPCs. You can stay at range. The Marauder wants to stay at range. T-Bolt has some range, but it wants to get up close. And if we're up close, that means you're zapping me with your missiles and your lasers. I need to have a little bit of heat management and heat discipline. So we start off with the long-range missile 15 pack. This is kind of the anchor point for the T-Bolt. It gives you something to do on the way in. So as you're moving forward with your lance, as you're moving forward with the tip of the spear, you've got a 15 pack. That's got some bite. Now, I'd like to see a 20. A little bit of personal bias there because, yes, I love long-range missile 20 packs. It doesn't quite have the tonnage, say, like a Cyclops or looking at the Atlas, where it can mount to 20, but 15 has some bite. As soon as we get down to 10 and 5, that's different. It's more of a harassment because you only have one and you have to hit in the spread of the missiles. 15, you roll average. It's got some punch. You roll legendary. You roll high. That's good. So we have one. We don't have redundancy. And redundancy in Battletech is where you have two of the same system, ideally, or two of the same range bracket. This idea is 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is some. Looking at the Archer or the Longbow, where you have 2 missile racks, that increases your chances of hitting. Now, that's okay for the T-Bolt because it's not a dedicated fire support mech. It's not like the Longbow or the Archer. The 1 is good. But target priority is kind of very, very important. There might be that temptation to fire off on that light mech and maybe cripple it. You don't have the redundancy. I would rather fire on a static target, on an advancing target. So if I'm moving forward and I'm going to be engaging a Warhammer, I want to fire with the 15 packs on that to start softening it up. Get those 2 or 3 hits on the way in. That's going to help me, if I can get off some of those armor bubbles on your mech, that's going to help me now when I close in to maintain discipline with my shorter ranged weapons, because I've already weakened you a little bit. So we've got the 15 pack. We start to close. Now we have the large laser. And the first thing you kind of look at with the large laser, it's easy to equate this and say, well, Fritz, we're looking at something like the Battlemaster. We're looking at other machines that for their primary non-missile or non-ballistic, if we're looking energy, they're mounting a PPC. We kind of have the tonnage. The challenge here is you got to get in all your other stuff and heat. So we lose 2 points of damage, 8 to 10 pushing it out, and we lose a little bit of the heat also. Large laser it's not the PPC, doesn't have the bite of that, but it's still 8 points. It's still pretty solid. So now what you're going to see is, for the heat management, it depends on where we're engaging. I'll start with the missiles. Then if it looks like we're going to be a little standoffish as I close, I'll work in tandem with the large laser and then the missiles. We're building massive heat. Those are two very, very hot systems. I need to be mindful because I only have 15 heat sinks. That's the point where shaving off any heat that you can, maybe instead of running, you're walking, pushing that forward. But we have the large laser. There's a couple of concessions. I'd like the 20 pack. We have the 15. I'd like a PPC for 10 points, but we have the laser for 8. But now those concessions that we've made, now we get to the bite of the T-Bolt. And it is extremely well armored. So these minor trade-offs in spread and potential damage for the 65 tons. It's only 65 tons. You look at it and you play it on the table and it has the feeling like an 85 or a 90 ton mech. It's only 65 tons. It's a lot of armor. It's got a lot packed into it for minor point of downgrades in terms of weapons. But we're closing. Now we've got 3 medium lasers. We've got the short-range missile 2. We'll put the machine guns aside for a moment and kind of look at a little tactica with that. The medium lasers and the short-range missile 2, that's got some bite. That's got the range. It's got the damage. You're pushing those out. So we're switching to them. Now we get to the machine guns. And I'm glad the mech has a machine gun because it can deal with infantry. It can deal with annoying infantry. Dealing with infantry, an example from a recent game, I was running my T-Bolt alongside the outskirts of some buildings. We were doing the urban tech, doing the city fight, city tech type thing. And there were infantry, so I'm trying to run as fast as I can. I did not want to stop to engage the infantry. It was the beginning of the game. I also had some other units that could deal with that infantry. I had a couple of little shots here and there, but it was necessary to move by. When you deal with infantry with the Thunderbolt, it's not a dedicated... It should not be, by default, running around trying to kill infantry. If they're a speed bump, if they're on the way, if you can bypass them, fine. But sending it off just because it has machine guns. We see this in combined arm lists where suddenly you realize maybe you're dealing with a lot of infantry. They're dug in, they're fortified, they're in buildings, they're going to be a pain to dig out. All you have for machine guns is the T-Bolt. Look at the battle value. The battle value of the T-Bolt, and you're trading the actions, the turns for 100 BV, on the infantry, 150, depending on what you're taking and how many. It's not worth that trade. So generally speaking, I don't want to engage infantry with those machine guns, but I have it. The only time that changes is we see this as kind of a finisher move, kind of on a sidebar. You have these heavy and assault mechs. They start taking a lot of damage. They start opening up to potential criticals. Maybe there's ammo in there or weapons or system components. That's when infantry becomes super deadly based on the spread of how they attack and the groupings. So dropping in infantry, we're sidebarring a little bit, dropping in infantry, if you have a Karnov, mid to late game around heavy and assault mechs, the threat factor just becomes massive. So if my T-Bolt's taking a pounding and it's really getting beat on, and it's now some infantry appear mid to late game and I'm wounded, then yes, I have the machine guns, and then yes, absolutely I want to zap them. So the timing of how to engage, when to engage, whether I'm going to engage or move past, that depends. The idea with the T-Bolt is to use those medium lasers to really open things up and then close to almost point blank where you have the missiles and the machine guns crit seeking. You're trying to, it's not so much generating damage once you've opened things up. It's about trying to roll the dice on that table with the facing to get to those internal places and possibly roll for crit. So a very, very potent, powerful mech. And also keep in mind, 65 tons. That's got bite. You're going to start kicking. You're going to be punching. Now, if you're punching, another example with the large laser, I should say no minimums. It's not the PPC. But if you punch, you are giving up that shot unless you're using, I think it's the combat perks, which let you shoot and punch. We'll leave that for a side because not everyone plays with that. But don't be necessarily afraid to trade shots to be able to punch, because that's a 1 in 6 chance if you connect to the head. That's a 1 in 6 chance, giving the tonnage some serious damage. That's a 1 in 6 chance to the left or right torso or center torso. There's a lot that you can do focusing on that upper half of the mech. So be ready to close, be ready to throw that tonnage around, be ready really to bully your way, but heat management. Be careful on how you push the heat.